All right. So here we go. All right. First question. My question for the respected Ajahns this evening is, how do you transition from the Rupa to Arupa jhanas?
Okay, once there's no such thing as arupa jhana. That's just a translation, a term which is kind of added. So once you have experienced rupa jhanas, if you stay in rupa jhana long enough, then it transitions into the arupa states. You don't do it. You don't make a decision. You don't try and go from this place to that place. It happens naturally. So you can't do anything by the time you get there. But first of all, make sure you get into to the rupa, the ordinary. I can't really call them ordinary. Get to the jhanas first of all. Make sure you got into a jhanas, and then that question doesn't make any sense anymore.
Okay, next question, which might not make sense to Ajahn. Venerable Chanda, how do you do more insight way of breathing and not more samadhi way of breathing? You mentioned this in explaining the first tetrad of Anapanasati Sutta. Is it something like the Mahasi method? Okay, so to clarify what I meant, I'm not saying that one way of breathing is insight or samadhi. What I'm saying is that these are two qualities that develop through any kind of practice, no matter what object we are aware of. We can develop samadhi, we can develop insight, and normally both are developed together. However, there's a way of watching anything, any object, which focuses on its impermanent nature. And this is before jhana. Okay, so this is my practice before emphasizing more samatha practices. And what would happen for me is that I would have this perception of impermanence regarding the feelings in the body mainly. So through doing the body scan, rather than just scanning the body and relaxing the parts of the body, I would notice that the feelings were constantly changing. And then when it came to watching the breath, I would also notice that the feelings in the breath were constantly changing. So I would be noticing that as my primary way of perceiving the breath, if you like, rather than just noting whether, or noticing, being aware of whether it is coming in and out, whether it's long and short. I was more aware of the nature, the qualities of the breath. And often that would manifest also as a feeling, as Vedana, that was kind of changing and dissolving all the time. And because of this, because the object was kind of, the awareness was focused on something dissolving, it wasn't stable enough, it wasn't conceptual enough to go into deep samadhi of the jhana type. So that is where the distinction comes in of knowing the breath or kind of feeling the breath, which is much more body based. So if it's body based, it's unlikely to go into jhana. You basically need to come to the point where the breath remains so smooth and consistent and so stable in a way that it can become a mental object. And then you lose the body disappears completely, and all you have is this idea of the breath or the impression of the breath, which then turns into piti, which then can turn into the nimitta. So that's kind of what I meant. And also in the Mahasi method, as I understand it, or through observing the breath arising and falling in the belly, you're also emphasizing impermanence. And some teachers teach that by observing the air element, you're actually practicing four element meditation. So if you're more focused on the quality of the air rather than whether the breath is coming in or going out, it turns into something more like what is described in the Visuddhimagga as four elements meditation, namely air element. And that can take you up to close to jhana, but probably not all the way because there's just too much analysis going on. So that's one understanding that I can share. So it's a different method that is taught by different teachers in Myanmar, particularly. But I don't think that's what the Anapanasati Sutta is pointing to here. It seems to me quite clear that this is pointing towards how to know the breath in a way that leads to jhanas. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Does it, honestly? Okay. All right, I'll read this out for you, Ajahn. Good evening, and thanks to Ven Candā and Ajahn Brahm. I would like to ask, another question regarding speech she gave. Okay, this afternoon on the Anapanasati Sutta, the question concerns the first tetrad, where she explained the various types of breathing practices. I didn't quite understand the last one, which Ven Candā learned as a Burmese practice, perhaps about the breathing becoming imperceptible. I did not understand, and the question is confused as well. Okay, so this was nothing to do with any practice in Burma that I did. I think you're asking about what happens when the breathing disappears. So this is happening throughout the Anapanasati Sutta in the sense that the breathing is getting more and more into the background as the mental qualities take over. So in the first tetrad, the last stage of that is that the last two stages is first that you observe the whole breath. So from start to finish, the whole body of the breath. And then the breath calms down. It shouldn't really be you calm the breath. It's just the breath starts to calm down on its own because you don't need so much air when you're actually getting very still. And then in the second tetrad, the breath starts to fade into the background, and the piti, the bliss that comes as a result of staying with the breath and of the mind energizing, becomes the main object. And even that piti starts to settle and quieten down. The piti and the sukha quieten down by the end of the second tetrad. By the third tetrad, the breath is actually perceived as a light. So it's as though you're seeing the breath now through the mind sense door. And the brightness that comes into the mind is the reflection of the mind that's getting very pure and very energized. So at this stage, especially when the nimitta becomes very strong, you're unlikely to be aware of the breath at all. But it's not that it's imperceptible. I mean, you've got more mindfulness, not less mindfulness. But it's more that the power of the mind takes over and the breath just fades into the background. The breath has done its job, so to speak, to get to that powerful mind that can actually enter a jhana. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you, Venerables, for the teachings, warmth, and laughter. It's been a lift raft. What does that mean? A lift raft? Oh, a life raft. Okay, you're not sort of levitating on a raft or anything. Okay, it's been a life raft. I hope your life wasn't at risk, but that's wonderful. I'm really struggling with my practice and staying present. I feel like I'm swimming in the river of hindrances and being swept away. I'm aware that letting go, not controlling, and letting be is going to help, along with being kind to myself. I'm just finding it hard to accept things as they are. I think my default thinking comes back to the shoulds. And the shoulds are prevalent, and I'm not doing it right. I'm not good enough, etc. Well, you know that's a pattern, so you can say, I know you, Mara. There you are again. Oh, poor little thing who doesn't think they're good enough. Of course you are. Any guidance or thoughts would be most gratefully appreciated. Request, please can you share a mudita meditation? Okay, do you want to speak to that one?
Well, again, first of all, one of the problems with describing what happens when you follow these beautiful paths, we always think we haven't got there yet and we aren't good enough or we're hopeless. Swimming in the hindrances, if you were swimming in the hindrances, you wouldn't know you're swimming in the hindrances. The hindrance would block and make you blind to where you are. So a lot of the times we are practicing, we are doing some of these jobs, maybe not doing them perfectly yet, but we're starting and we're getting to know these experiences which we feel in deep meditation or in ordinary meditation too. So don't look too far ahead. See if one can just have the idea, I'm going to be at peace today. I'm not going to fight these things. I'm not going to try and get anywhere. that was always a very good piece of advice. Just if you are, at home and you've got to make yourself a cup of tea, just make a cup of tea. And don't think, where does that fit in with defeating the five hindrances? Just make the cup of tea and enjoy and have some energy in the practice and don't ask for anything. Just see if you can just be here and enjoy this wonderful sense of listening to some of these teachings. Some you may not understand yet, but I mentioned that earlier. You're not expected to understand it yet. But later on, you allow these teachings to go inside of you, and almost they change the way you look and think. Now, often, for example, whenever I go on an aircraft, I never travel anywhere when I go in an aircraft. I only just sit in the seat and the aircraft does all the moving. I just do the sitting. So if your mind is wandering from place to place, I don't mean in an aircraft, I mean just with this thought and that thought, just see if you can just be with things. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't have to be on the breathing, just be with things. Wherever you are, that's where you're meant to be. So be here and be as kind as you possibly can to this moment. It is the kindness, the sort of embracing, the opening the door of your heart to this moment, which allows the stillness and the contentment to start to arise. And as it does start to arise, you actually surprise yourself. Hey, I'm feeling peaceful now. My mind isn't going all over the place. Or if it is, I'm going with it all the time. So we're not separated. That's one of the things I would suggest you could do, is make sure you never feel separated from the mind. So whatever thought is coming up, you be there with it.
That's lovely. And please, can you share a mudita meditation? Let's see what happens tomorrow. Okay, shall I do this one? Okay, so this is from someone here. I know several people from various cultures who've experienced intense, scary, and sometimes debilitating physical and emotional symptoms seemingly connected to non-human beings or beings, trying to communicate or build connections to them, usually over the course of many years. Many of these people seem to end up at monasteries as shamans or otherwise in spiritual circles. What's going on here? Can it be dangerous beyond the scary, painful sensations these people experience? What advice would you give or practices would you recommend to someone experiencing this? So I spoke to Ajahn Brahm about this just before we came in, and we both thought this was very unlikely that when these things happen, it's very rarely actually other beings creating problems for you. And in some cultures, this has become a kind of commonly accepted belief. So there's a lot of superstition around that. And whether or not sometimes it is connected to other beings may be the case, but unlikely. If it is the case, because it can happen sometimes, I think we need to remember that we as human beings, good human beings, living ethical lives, are more powerful than these invisible beings. And we can actually ask them to move on. We can share metta with them, share merits with them, and basically say that we're here to do good, and would they please kindly stop disturbing us and move on to a better place. So this is definitely something we can do. Of course, one of the issues here probably is the pain, right? So they're experiencing painful and scary sensations, which are intense, and that's probably because of the added belief that this is an invisible being doing something to them. And so I would say to try to offer yourself a great deal of loving kindness, first of all, and then, if at all possible, try to regard these feelings without the fear. So regard them with a lot of acceptance and peace and understanding. And maybe there are some emotional issues here which can be dissolved that way. So practices I would recommend to someone experiencing this, I think metta, actually. In the suttas, one of the first places that the Buddha talks about metta is when these monks go to quite a scary place in the forest and they are not properly prepared. And it does seem that there are some invisible beings there who try to frighten them. And the monks, thinking that they're really macho and, beyond all of this, actually get so frightened that they run back to the Buddha. We can't stay there. We can't stay there. And the Buddha actually recommends that they should do love and kindness practice. And when they do that, then the disturbances disappear. So whether they're really beings or whether they're just sort of personifications of your own fear, I think the metta will work in the same way. So that is my thought on that. Anything else?
Yeah, quite a couple of things. I remember one of the very impressive things which I saw with Ajahn Chah, that one morning that around his hut where he lived, we could hear in the distance there was some commotion at the entrance gate to Wat Pah Pong, and then we saw a couple of headmen of the nearby village coming, and they made the announcement to Ajahn Chah that one of the women in their monastery that evening had got possessed by this very dangerous spirit, and they were dragging her to see Ajahn Chah in order to solve the problem. And as soon as Ajahn Chah heard this, you could hear there was some commotion, something screaming at the gate of the monastery. And he asked two novice monks, "Can you please dig a deep hole?" And asked a couple of monks, "Can you please boil a lot of water? I need lots of boiling water." I never knew what he was on about. Hardly anybody else knew what Ajahn Chah was planning to do. But we were more taken up by this woman being dragged, to see Ajahn Chah. And she was incredible power. The fact it took 3 or 4 very strong men to hold her still. And she was foaming at the mouth, and she was swearing in really inappropriate language. And no one would speak like that in front of someone like Ajahn Chah. And all Ajahn Chah did was to ask, "I need some more hot water. I need to dig a bigger hole." And she was thrashing her arms around. It was very kind of exciting. And then Ajahn Chah said, "Is the water boiled yet? Is the hole big enough?" And these poor novices were sweating, trying to dig a big hole that quickly. And then Ajahn Chah said, "The spirit, the demon inside this woman is very, very dangerous. So dangerous is only one way to deal with this. We need to throw her in the hole once it's big enough, and then pour boiling water all over her, and then bury her alive. That's the only thing which would work." And that was extreme. And I didn't know if Ajahn Chah would do that. I was not that culturally used to the conditions in northeast Thailand at that period. But I was just, what's happening here? But one thing which I did see, which everybody else saw, was that the woman who was possessed, in brackets, that she started to calm down. She actually obviously thought that Ajahn Chah was capable of doing that to her. And her sense of self-survival started to kick in. And she started to calm down and stop thrashing around, stop swearing, and didn't need to be held down tightly by the other villagers. She started to get very, very peaceful. And soon, after only about 2 or 3 minutes, she was sitting in front of Ajahn Chah, exhausted. The hole hadn't been filled up with her yet. There was still lots of boiling water to come. But nevertheless, she calmed down. And Ajahn Chah gave her the 5 precepts. and then the villagers led her quietly, safely back home again. The Ajahn Chai was a case of, what was it called, emotional wisdom. Yeah, that he knew that and it's not going to be a demon has come inside of her. It's just for some reason or other that she was having what you might call like a psychosis, an emotional disturbance, and what would help her emerge from that disturbance was the feeling that if she didn't get her act together, if she didn't calm down, it would really be very dangerous for her. It's a brilliant thing actually to see. And I say this also because one of my best friends, still, I don't mind mentioning his name, that's Bernard Carr. He was an associate of Stephen Hawking's. He was one of my mates, my friends, another theoretical physicist from Cambridge. But he was also the president of the Psychic Research Society. And we would go hunting ghosts and spirits together when we were young. And he's full of reports and investigations. And one thing which he told me, that over 100 years of investigations into such phenomena, there's been never one case of a spirit or a ghost or something physically harming a human being. Said it has not happened. In movies, yes. In books, trying to be bestsellers, yes. But in actual truth, no. Those beings who do exist are not powerful enough to harm a human, which is one of the reasons why, as Venerable Chanda mentioned, if there is any ghost or spirit causing you any trouble, you just have to be either give loving kindness, but even if it's giving you trouble, please be quite firm and confident. Say, please, not now. What one monk once said when he was meditating in one of these jungle monasteries in Thailand, well known for ghosts. When one of the ghosts came into his room, this monk told him, right, sit down next to me. You can meditate with me, but if you start messing around, get out. Stop messing around. And that was the last time that ghost came into his hut. Good, yeah.
This is my first time joining a retreat. Thanks for the great experience. During this morning's meditation, I experienced the first time the body becomes floating and even flying like a cloud. And then a dark tunnel with a dark light appeared. I felt like the tunnel was sucking me in, and then the bell rang. What is that? Is it a deep meditation state, or what would a deeper meditation be like?
Okay, you get sucked in, you enjoy it immensely, very beautiful. You lose contact with the world, you come back again afterwards. So it's not dangerous at all. And you are very, very, very protected while you're inside those states. And it is drawing you into this thing which we call a mind, you. And we shouldn't call it you, into a mind. And your mind is just this process, this stream of consciousness, of the mental consciousness. And you have a lot of bliss, a lot of peace. And if you keep your nerve, because you're going to very powerful states, they are totally safe. And remembering that they are safe stops you feeling fear. I did already decide what the talk I'm going to give yesterday, the Sutta class. Tomorrow, yes. And that will be the Upakilesa Sutta. It has some interesting things at the beginning, but it also shows you how to deal with these beautiful lights, which are blissful, but which sometimes you need how to know a bit of detail about how to make sure they don't get disturbed and you have a beautiful time.
One last thing is wear earplugs. Then you won't hear the bell.
Oh yeah, that's a terrible thing, bells. That's why
We don't
I
have
don't
to
like
use the
them.
bells, but we do have to, I suppose, indicate.
Yeah, go on.
But if you wear earplugs, you might not hear it. Okay, very grateful to have been reintroduced to the practice of walking meditation. My body's become quite crooked over the years due to a number of injuries and joint cartilage issues. My physical balance is compromised and especially obvious when I walk slowly. I notice that my body instinctively compensates to stay upright and is gently learning how to rebalance. However, all the adjustments is making it feel as though there's a sense of control. But then if there wasn't, I'd be falling over. Am I missing anything? So, one thing you might be missing is walking a little bit faster. Because if it's when you walk slowly that you need more effort and it's more exhausting in a sense, and there's more compensation, more adjustments, then you may be getting a little bit tense. Of course, there's some kind of, if you want to call it control, there's some kind of awareness in that we know how to move our body, but for you, perhaps it takes a bit more effort because you got to regain that sense of balance again. So just walk in the way that's easiest for you. Walk on the grass, maybe, or walk a little bit faster so that it's not too difficult. But of course, it's a bit different. It's a more active meditation than the sitting meditation. But you can gain really strong, clear mindfulness from the walking. So if it's helpful, carry on. When practicing silent present moment awareness and no sense impressions are present, do you sit with being aware that you are aware? And how does this apply day to day life? To day life, for example, walking in the woods and no sense impressions are coming in. There must be some. Do you just practice being aware of awareness as you walk?
I would actually say do that Emperor's Three Questions meditation. Now is the most important time. What is right in front of you right now? You are aware, you're not unconscious, so you're aware of something. Don't choose what it is. You're aware of something right now, and once you're aware of it, be kind to it. That's all. Keep it simple.
Mm. And there will be sense impressions. If you're walking, then you have to be feeling your feet. If you couldn't feel your feet, you'd just fall over. So there is some feeling there. That's a sense impression. It might be that there's not many sounds. There must be a few. Or sights, and it might be that those senses are really calming down. If they're really calming down to the extent that you can't even feel your body, then sit down. Sit down. It's unlikely to happen in day-to-day life, I would say, that you actually lose all feeling in the body while walking. Following on from the Sutta class earlier today, could you speak a little more on how to develop confidence in the nimitta when it's appearing regularly during meditation, but keeps changing in shape, brightness, location, and so on? I'm trying to let go of the judgment that stable nimittas are good and changing ones is less good, but it's easier said than done. Thank you for the wonderful teachings.
Tomorrow I'll be talking about that.
But just in brief, though, we could say that perhaps it's not about good or less good. It's just about mature or yet to be fully developed, perhaps. Anyway, you want to talk about tomorrow in more depth?
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave that for now at this stage. So tomorrow, how to develop more confidence in the nimitta. Okay, hello, Ajahn Brahm and Ajahn Chanda. Nimitta question. Practicing loving kindness, piti and sukha come up quickly. About 5 to 10 minutes in the meditation, the attention goes to the breath. A nimitta comes up, formed as a circle, expanding and contracting. Then it will disappear. I'm not sure how to cultivate the nimitta. Is it too early in the meditation? Should I stay in piti sukha, loving kindness, longer? This has been happening for years. I can go into detail. Shall I say something? Or you want to?
Yes, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow.
Okay, but just for now, I think one of the issues here is that you want to cultivate it. and you're thinking about how to develop it rather than just really appreciating it exactly as it is and just accepting that it's there. It's so interesting that even with the deeper states of meditation, we always want something more. We're never quite satisfied. And I think the main way of like deepening the practice at any stage is to just develop absolute contentment and complete gratitude that there's little nimitta moving around or expanding and contracting and then disappearing has come to say hello. So if you can just remain extremely quiet and extremely welcoming and just allow it to come, allow it to go, then eventually it will come back in and stay for longer. But if it thinks you're trying to grab it and you want it to stay longer and it's not good enough, it just won't stay. You're finding too much fault. All right. I've been rejoicing in the work of Father Greg Boyle and the Homeboy Industries, the largest gang rehab and re-entry program in the world. Their work shines with exquisite tenderness, helping former gang members re-enter society with dignity and compassion. It made me wonder, are there similar re-entry programs in Buddhist communities for monastics who disrobe? No. Programs that offer no livelihood, housing, or emotional and spiritual support for those returning to lay life after years of celibacy and sense restraint. Not from monasteries. As a layperson who's been keeping the 8 precepts, I feel deep empathy for anyone navigating that in-between space. Are there resources or reflections from the Sangha on how we, as communities of spiritual siblings, might support those in transition with exquisite tenderness, cherished empathy, and joyful compassion, free from cruelty and distress?
One of our problems which we have in the monasticism in the West is that once a person becomes a monk, and if they leave afterwards, it's kind of tough, just keeping even a monastery looked after. And how much effort does it take to keep Anukampa Grove just going? And so it's tough to be able to, if somebody decides to leave, and not for any sort of a really bad reason, they just find that they, for one reason or another, they can't carry on. And then we want to look after them as well. Sometimes we're not that well developed as monastic communities in the West to do things like that. But nevertheless, we do have a large network of supporters. And so we do try and at least let some of those people who are having difficulties and have disrobed, to let them kind of stay in the monastery or close to the monastery, or even give them jobs, to do with the monastery somewhere. I remember this one person that when he kind of disrobed, he was reasonably skilled, but I just made him or got him and paid for it to just do some seats in our meditation hall in Jhana Grove. And, paid him a really good price. He didn't work that hard, but nevertheless, that this was for the fact he could get a bit of money in the bank. He was staying at Jhana Grove while he was doing this work to get a chance to get started again. Now he's doing really, 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 really well.
I would also like to add that if this is something you're called to and feel incredible amount of passion and inspiration in, it could also be on the lay community to some extent to provide such support. One of my observations over many years is that often when monastics leave monasteries, even when the teachers reach out to them and try and support them, they actually don't want that support because they want to leave the monastery. They actually want to try and reorient into the lay life. And, there are lots of examples of this. Sometimes they just disappear also. They've done their time there and they have other avenues to explore. So quite often they actually want a lot of distance from monastic life, but not always. And as Ajahn Brahm said, there are extended communities. But I wonder if this is something that, some lay communities can organize. I remember going to Gaia House actually when I first came over here, and I think they'd seen so many nuns disrobe over the years from the monasteries over here, like a lot, like the vast majority actually after these 5 points, which were laid down to keep the nuns in their place and to stop them ever taking bhikkhuni ordination. So this was well known in the kind of insight circles over here. And when I came from Australia, they thought, oh, I wonder how long she'll last. So they actually said to me, oh, if you, decide to leave the monastic life, you can come and stay here. We can support you on a long retreat, which was very nice. But I knew they'd sort of got it wrong because I'm a for lifer, so that's not going to happen. But I appreciate it all the same. So I wonder if that's something that Dhamma communities can think about, and to respect the monastics, and also to invite them to teach former monastics. There's another organization in America. It's Cloud Mountain. Yes, Cloud Mountain. There's Clear Mountain, Empty Cloud, and Cloud Mountain, so it's very confusing. But the Cloud Mountain have a kind of program, a special nuns initiative where they support nuns, especially bhikkhunis, to teach, and also some of the ex-nuns, whether they've been bhikkhunis or siladhara or whatever. So they really make that effort to support them and to elevate them as teachers so that that wisdom they gained is not lost. So yeah, great idea, especially if you're called to it. I think that'd be amazing. When returning back to life after attending retreat, it's not yet. How could I work on finding space for continued practice? My day-to-day life has many demands on my time and energy, and I tend to find that I struggle to prioritize myself and the meditation practice.
Okay. One way of doing that is to realize if you grant yourself even a half an hour of meditation during the lunch period, you can have your lunch afterwards, then you find that regenerates your energy and your peace. And in the afternoon, you get more work done in less time of higher quality. Because you've meditated, your brain has a rest, can focus better. You do get more work done. And I remember teaching that years ago, and it has now been adopted by Harvard Business School as an investment of time. It's a nice way of, now you may not agree with that, but it's a nice way of looking at it, that time is not such thing that you lose when you do meditation practice. You invest the time and you make more time. You get 2 hours work done in one, and it's a much higher quality. And that's one of the reasons why you're saving time. And also when you go home after the day's work, if you've been meditating during the middle of the day for half an hour, you still get your quota of work done. And also you are not so sickly, angry, tired. You can actually talk with the people who you care about, your family and your friends. It's kind of like making time, not always being under the impression that time is kind of fixed and you can't sort of make it and get more time by meditating. So please experiment with that. If you have a busy job, meditate during the middle of the day. You make time.
I'm going to do this one, and then I'm going to go to one that you could perhaps answer because it came from yesterday. I just found it. Okay. Thank you, Ajahn Brahm, for your insightful translation, and Ajahn Chanda for your great explanation of the Anapanasati Sutta. Please, can you elaborate on how to approach, I think, the teachings after samadhi? Also, would it be beneficial for one's practice to engage in such explorations before samadhi when the mind is busy and restless? With much appreciation. So what I understand for after samadhi is that the mind, if it's well conditioned by the Buddha's teachings and by your teachers and by these suttas, it will be almost natural that you will start to reflect in these ways. And as I said, you will have something concrete to base the exploration of anicca on. And it's an exploration that's a kind of experiential thing rather than an intellectual contemplation. So you will see that things really do change. You will also see the conditioned nature even of something like a jhana and how it has certain causes that bring it into being. And then when those causes fall apart, the jhana ends. And then the viraga one, you'll have seen that things fade and cease. You'll have seen it happening gradually, as the hindrances disappear, as the joy takes over the mind, etc. And afterwards, you'll be able to reflect that on what has faded away in those states. What is it? And then it's nirodha, so something has ceased. You've seen the breath cease, you've seen the body cease, you've seen the hindrances be temporarily suspended, but maybe for a long period of time. You've seen the five sense world disappear. You know what it's like to be only in the realm of the mind and how blissful that is. And so you know that the body is so much suffering and such a burden. The five senses are a burden. And the happiness of when that's let go of is so much greater than any happiness you can have through the five sense world, in the five sense world. And then the last one is the letting go, which is, I understand it anyway, as things that are actually let go of in your life as a result of those insights. Things like anger, things like, it's not necessarily that you've let it go completely, but it won't make any sense. So the letting go just continues. And the practice before, to practice these things before samadhi can be very helpful. I mean, I did practice a lot of reflections on impermanence for years and years and years, like having a perception of everything just disappearing, dissolving constantly with a very sustained kind of mindfulness that didn't allow the hindrances in. I don't know that they were fully abandoned because there's still some sense of the doer being present, but there was certainly a great deal of equanimity and a lot of massive transformation in my life. So it can be very helpful, but it's limited. And I think for me now, coming across the teachings on samadhi in the way that they're taught by Ajahn Brahm, and mainly Ajahn Brahm, actually, I think if you've already begun on the path towards samadhi, then the insights you can get after that are going to be deeper. However, if you don't ever use your perception in a way that, you know, explores things like impermanence and fading and non-self, it's going to be harder to get into samadhi. So the two go together, and it's a matter of emphasis, I would say. It's a matter of inclination as well with the individual. So certainly do some exploration of those things beforehand, because otherwise it can be a very long path. And personally, I've seen that if people only work for jhana, like especially if they're focused on getting into jhana, they're actually throwing away so many experiences that fall short in their mind. And they're not learning a great deal. There's just a lot of craving to go for the jhanas, and they're still in this kind of cycle of measuring bad meditation, good meditation, etc. And that causes a lot of pain. So I think a balanced practice is very important there. Dear Ajahns, is it possible to move the body when having a nimitta or when seeing a nimitta? Is there any thought arising at the same time, or is it not possible?
Thought can still occur while you're experiencing a nimitta. It kind of disturbs the nimitta a little. The stronger the nimitta, the less powerful is any idea of thought. Moving your body, a lot of time that will disturb the nimitta as well. So a lot of times, if the nimitta is really strong and it's a time when the hindrances are just kind of disappearing and almost gone, there's a lot of contentment and peace there in the body. So you'd hardly be moving the body at all.
But nimittas can come up in walking meditation, so it's possible to be moving the body and still be staying with a nimitta.
The nimittas in a walking meditation are not strong.
Okay.
Because usually what happens is if you are doing walking meditation, you start to see nimittas inside the mind. You don't know where you're walking to. You lose your sense of direction. And, you know, you've got your eyes open and you can't see anything. The nimittas are much more strong than what you see with your open eyes. So the advice is, if you are getting strong nimittas and you're doing walking meditation, please sit down.
All right. In the mindfulness of breathing, I can get as far as piti and pleasure, sukha, with the help of metta, but no further. And I'm most content with that. Excellent. I don't think I've ever experienced a nimitta. Any advice or tips on getting to jhana? Oddly enough, I do enjoy practicing letting go meditation, which is in the final part of the Anapanasati Sutta, but this is out of sequence. Oh, we have a beautiful cat. Oh my goodness, it's coming in.
Siamese cat.
Oh,
Hi.
let's not invite it in though, because I'm allergic. Just let it be.
Okay.
It's a very shy cat. We have a beautiful cat. It's a little bit like a nimitta.
Okay.
Very shy. As soon as you look at it, it disappears. But she's never actually come this close before. It's because we're all like quiet in quiet meditation. So anyway, this is a simile for Nimitta because she had a very beautiful face and she was rare. She's a rare cat. Anyway, you're doing great. Don't even think about going deeper. You're content, and that's the cause for going deeper. So the fact that you're getting piti and sukha with the help of metta is wonderful. I would probably say that if you're practicing metta in a kind of in a way that's still using directed thought, that you could start to how do you say, like thin out the thinking, use it less and less and less, and get more and more connected to the piti and sukha, to the meaning of the metta, and allow the mind to become quieter and quieter and quieter, more and more content. But that will happen naturally anyway, because it will get to the point where the piti and sukha is so strong you can't really articulate the words. So when you have enough confidence in that, then just continue and see where it goes. Yeah, you may be one of those people that feels the nimitta. And actually, Ajahn Brahm definitely focuses on the piti and sukha as the kind of important thing in metta meditation, and that it's possible to get into jhanas that way. So I wouldn't worry about what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Just carry on with the practice. You're letting go, you're being content, and the letting go has to be there throughout. Remember, letting go is part of the Eightfold Path, factor number 2, kamma. So letting go is an attitude that we bring to our way of practice from the outset. So I think you're doing really great. All right, there's one from yesterday. I wanted you to answer this. I was a bit tired yesterday morning, but decided to do breath meditation. After just being with breath for some time, it felt a bit dull. But then I saw some flickering lights and remembered Ajahn Brahm's tip to lean into the lights. So gently did that, and it got brighter and brighter. I felt like bathed in sunshine. After some time, though, I felt I was lifted upwards, and all of a sudden I was high up and floating in the air, and was watching something that looked like a horizon stretching immensely far away, and the bright sunshine was coming from all over the place. After I came back, my body and mind was so at ease, and it felt like sparks and warmth showered through the body for a very long time. Was this a nimitta?
Probably. Or if you want to say, definitely yes.
And this is a kind of nimitta that's developing,
Yeah,
and becoming stronger and stronger. Yeah. Is that it? Is that your
yes.
answer?
A lot of times when people experience a nimitta and they haven't experienced many of them, they always doubt it. And these days, of all the people who have asked me about their nimitta, thousands of them, then 999 out of 1,000, it was a nimitta.
Do you think it's helpful to call it something though? Because can that mean that people are looking for certain experience? And every experience is different, isn't it?
Of course, every experience is different, but they have common themes. And one of those common themes of the nimitta, of the light nimitta, it's much easier to be sure that that is a nimitta. One is incredibly powerful. You have lots of piti sukha. The awareness of the body is vanishing or almost not there at all. And one of the common themes of the nimitta, and you can't fake this, is that when you see the color of that nimitta, it is not the same color of yellow or white or blue that you see in the world. You can recognize it as blue, but the shading is so beautiful and perfect and pure. More blue than blue is one of the ways which people usually describe it. Or more white than white. Clearest white you've ever seen. Those sorts of descriptions are something which is very typical of nimittas.
I might have to change the sutta for tomorrow now.
Oh no, there's still plenty to say.
Okay. Thank you for your teachings. I have strong pains in the body, and sometimes when I start to settle into meditation, they get more noticeable. That's normal. I'm confused between getting involved, like sending the metta, making the pain larger, sending air or heat, etc., until the body gets more relaxed, which I can do, or just letting it be, telling I'm safe, that it belongs, move on and be a passenger. I've tried both, but would love your opinion. I'm enjoying the retreat so much. Well, to me, sending metta is letting it be, is telling you that you're safe, is telling it that it belongs. So to me, that is the metta. The metta is certainly not doing it so that it goes away or until the body gets relaxed. Metta is unconditional. That's its quality. Making it larger, sending air or heat, I wouldn't do. When I might have mentioned before that if something's very intense, like an anxiety attack, I'm saying that you can expand your awareness to include more than just the area that's painful. But it's not that you extend the pain. It's not that you actually stretch it or mess with it in any way, or even try to get rid of it. So sending air or heat is probably a little bit too much involvement, I would think. It seems to me from the question that it sounds like you know that. The thing is, the purpose of the way we deal with these things is not to get rid of them. It's to develop beautiful qualities in the mind. So see which quality you can observe it through that feels most beautiful, that feels most ennobling in a way. And that is your meditation, not the pain itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I know that one thing which some chronic, severe pain sufferers used to do over in Australia many years ago. And the gentleman who told me about this, that he had chronic extreme pain in those days, and they told him that having given him a scan of his brain, the type of pain you're experiencing 24/7 is like having your arm sawn, with no anesthetic, with a two-handed chainsaw. He said they needed something to describe to his friends and parents, and even to someone like me, what he was actually feeling. It was extreme pain all the time. And I was surprised also to hear him say that his condition would allow him to take any drug which was on the shelf. It wasn't nothing illegal for him. He had exemption because his pain was just so severe and extreme. But I remember he tried to explore the practice of meditation because, he was highly motivated to meditate and just to see if something could happen. And I still recall, it's quite a few years ago now, when he came to see me. And after a meditation class I did in Perth, and he had a big smile on his face. And that's when he said, I've finally done it. And I asked him, what have you done? And I'd been talking to him before. Have you got the ECG flat? He said, no, I did ECG weeks ago. And I've got the EEG flat. In other words, just by his willpower, his brain could be so incredibly still. And then he turned around and said, see all those people in the back at the little hall which I was teaching meditation in? He said, those are the doctors and nurses in Osborne Park Clinic who want to find out what the heck's going on in this place. I've never seen anything like this before. Meditation is a wonderful way to explore what this actual pain means. And it's not that you try and get rid of it, but the usual method, if you could understand this, is to go deep into its middle, like the eye of the storm idea, right in the middle of those physical feelings to the place where they kind of disappear.
There's quite a few more questions. Shall we keep going?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Dear Ajahns, you talked about Nimitta. I've also heard about Kasina. What role do they play and have you practiced them?
Kasinas are extremely difficult to do unless you have some latent ability in that area. Casinas is where you have an image painted on a piece of card or something, and then you can look at that, close your eyes, and you can reproduce it in your mind after you close your eyes. It takes a lot of time to keep focusing on this and to be able to maintain that image with your eyes closed. Then afterwards, if you can maintain the image with your eyes closed, that does turn into a nimitta. It's extremely difficult to do, and as only a few people are able to do things like that, but it creates a nimitta inside your mind, bypasses things like the breathing or anything else. People who try it usually waste a lot of time.
I've also met a lot of people who say they've tried this and practiced this, but what I found in some practitioners, from my perspective, is that because it's an object purely based on concepts, it doesn't have any bearing on the body. It's not an object that they can go to within themselves. It doesn't yield the same kind of insight either. And it can almost be like a little bit of a mental game. And I wonder if sometimes it's almost an imagination that's happening inside the mind. So, yeah, there was Eric though, wasn't there, who got sucked into that. He's died now, so
he did it very well.
Yeah, he just did it by chance. But this must be some past life kind of experience, because he was just riding home on like the Perth Underground or whatever, subway, and he saw a sign which was blue, and his mind just went into the blueness, and he stayed on that train right to the end, and then probably back again until they finally got him out of there after a couple of hours. So, and he continued to develop his meditation quite well, but of course he had access to really good teachings to contextualize that, and it happened completely naturally. So I think if you have the breath, this is one of the meditation methods, if not the most praised method by the Buddha. And I don't think Kasina's is in the suttas, is it?
It is.
Is it?
Yes.
Whereabouts?
In the suttas.
Many times?
No.
Yeah, it's kind of on the periphery, let's say. It's not a central method that Buddha particularly recommended. Sorry, I'm ringing the bell with my foot by accident. Here we go. Next question. Dear Ven Candā and Ajahn Brahm, in meditation, I sometimes experience a shift from bright and delightful sensations such as light or stillness into a natural sense of compassion towards the suffering mind, but this can become something the mind wants to hold on to. The Anapanasati Sutta describes a path from joy to calming the mind and towards liberation. How can I move through these stages without holding on to them? Sometimes attention moves away from simply being with the experience into observing. It can feel like there's an observer behind the observer. When the mind begins to hold on to joy or compassion, or shifts into observation, it no longer feels like being present. It seems the mind is subtly doing something again rather than resting. Is it possible to observe the fading of consciousness itself, not just thoughts and sensations, but the process of being conscious? Can this be seen directly in meditation?
That's the very deep meditations of the immaterial states. That's where you see consciousness vanish. You don't see it, you experience it. And that when these experiences are very, very easily remembered, clearly remembered, they still haven't found an English word to describe some of these experiences and the strength of these experiences. They're like trauma. If you've had a traumatic incident, it stays with you. You can't really get it out of your mind. It's like, it's when they're burnt into your mind. And when those happen, these are pleasant experiences, incredibly pleasant experience, but you cannot sort of dismiss them. You cannot forget that they're there for you any old time. And that's one of the reasons, that's how we remember what it's like to be in these very, very refined states of mind. They're just, we can turn to them whenever we want to. What was that like again? And then we can remember them so clearly, and there's no distortion at all. And that's one of the reasons why we don't try to actually remember them. When we're actually in there, it's like there's not enough uh, conscious conscious awareness. There is not enough movement of the mind available to get a picture of it. I do remember just when I was young, we used to have these game shows on the TV, and one of these game shows was actually they put a picture on the TV screen of what is this? And what it looked like was like a dot with a piece of white ring around it, and that's about it. And the answer was it was the tip of a pencil, a sharpened pencil. But because you could only see it from one direction, that one direction was fixed, it seemed to be so impossible to see what it really was. That's like the deep meditations. You haven't got any movement possible to actually to understand something as you normally would. But once you come out from those meditations, you still got the image there, and now you can move, and then you understand exactly what it is. So if you wanted to experience this consciousness vanishing, mind consciousness vanishing, the mind disappearing, that is the purpose of the immaterial states.
Okay. Should you take any notice of your dreams during a retreat? I mean, if you are aware of your dreams, then you don't try not to be aware of them because the mind is clear and sometimes the dreams become very lucid. So you probably will naturally be aware of them, but I think you don't need to analyze them. That's what I would say. Just let them go. Usually it's the mind just processing something and coming up with visions and images that kind of convey some sort of way for the mind to release something it's holding on to or to inform you about how you're feeling. But there's no need to go into analyzing them, just work with the feelings that they leave.
Can I tell the story about the five angels?
Depends how much time we've got. Can.
Okay, I'm going to take the opportunity now.
All right.
This one guy on a retreat, he dreamt of five angels, and his five angels lined up, and they presented five big pots full of gold coins, worth a fortune. And he received each one of them in a dream. When he woke from that dream, he opened his eyes, and there was no angels in the room. He didn't mind that. There was no pots of gold either. So I thought it was just a dream. And so when he got out of bed, he went down to the kitchen, and there, some really strange reason, his wife had made him five boiled eggs, five pieces of toast, and what else? Five oranges.
5 eggs?
5 eggs. Okay, 5 eggs. He wondered what's with this magic number 5. He looked at the newspaper, it was the 5th of May, and he thought there's an omen here somewhere. And so he looked in the back of the newspaper. There was a racetrack called Ascot, ASCOT, 5 letters. And he just looked, just for, maybe he looked at the horse racing that afternoon. On the 5th race in the afternoon, the 5th horse running on that 5th race was called Five Angels. It was like an omen. So he said, okay, I'm going to give this a go. Sometimes, you only have these lucky opportunities once in your life. I better take it. So he took the afternoon off work. He went to the bank, first of all, at lunchtime. He drew 5,000, this is an English thing, so let's call it £5,000, and took it to the racetrack on horse number 5, race number 5, 5 angels, £5,000 to win. The lucky number 5 could not be wrong. It was a real omen. The lucky number 5 was not wrong. His horse came in 5th. A couple of people understood that. So if you have dreams, sometimes we misinterpret them, and that is the problem. I like that joke. So sorry for that.
No, it's good. Almost finished. 2 more questions. Dear Ajahn Brahm and Ajahn Chanda, when I meditate, I often enter peaceful and deep state of stillness, then return to the ordinary world. I'm glad you said the ordinary world and not the real world. Much like waking up from sleep. Since I'm usually very busy with work and family, I wonder, should I gently end the meditation regardless of how long I've been sitting and move on to my responsibilities? Would it be helpful to set a timer before meditating so I can stop when the alarm goes off, or should I continue meditating if I don't hear it? Well, if you don't hear it, you won't have much choice but to continue meditating. So that's all very well. If this happens often, maybe you can make some kind of arrangement with your husband that he can stand in just in case. I would say it's too precious to let go of too easily, but the main thing would be to gently come out when it's time to do so. And just notice how it feels to be back in the sensory world. If you have left the world of the senses, notice what's happening at that level of sense contact and how you're responding to the senses as you emerge. Yeah, what do you think, Ajahn?
You can always make that resolution that I must come out at 10 p.m. I must come out at 10 p.m. I must come out at 10 p.m. You can experiment with that. Even like tonight, what time do you want to sort of get up in the morning? And you can put your alarm clock 5 minutes after, say, the time you want to get up. So you want to get up at 6 a.m. Put your alarm clock 5 minutes past 6, and 6 o'clock, tell yourself, when you go to sleep, tell yourself, I will get up at 6 o'clock, I will get up at 6 o'clock, I will get up at 6 a.m. And it's amazing just how well that works.
I would also say, my husband will get up at 6 a.m. My husband will get up. I'm being cheeky. But
Yes,
it's true,
yeah.
isn't it? If we have a partner, then it's not all on us to look after the kids. Is it?
I don't know, I've got no kids.
You've got loads of kids.
They get up by themselves.
Okay. Last question. What gets reborn if the 5 khandhas continue their process of arising and passing away? Is it the will and consciousness that carry the karmic impressions? So it's 2 different questions. What gets reborn is the 5 khandhas, but is it the will and consciousness that carry the karmic impressions? What do you think, Ajahn?
No, sometimes
Sankara,
there's will and
Paccaya Vijnana.
There's will and consciousness don't carry it. They're almost part of it. They're shaped by it every moment. And it's almost like, what's that word? It's folded yeah. It's folded in to just your 5 khandhas. The stream of consciousness is a simple way of calling it. We don't have a stream of consciousness without a stream of sankharas and perceptions and vedana and also form as well. That's all inside of that.
Yeah. Is this thing about the 5 khandhas? When they're called the 5 aggregates of clinging, people sometimes think that if you don't cling to them, then it's fine to have 5 khandhas. But the point is that that's their nature, is to cling. And the clinging is within the khandhas. So I think in the same way, the kamma is within, the kamma is the will is the kamma, it's the active part of sankhara.
When you get reborn, ask that question. And I say, when you get reborn, because sometimes people think that when you get reborn, that your mental faculties are very small, but the first few weeks of life, they're not.
Small?
They're very undeveloped.
But you're saying that at that time that they actually might remember.
Yes. Lots of people can. There's so many cases. There was one case which I remember. There was this Western couple, a Caucasian in Perth, and they came to see me because they had 2 children, and their new child had just come in from the hospital to actually stay at home. That they was just in a little cot in the front room, and the elder child, the mummy said, go and say good night to your baby brother and then go to bed. And she went over to her baby brother. This child went over to the baby brother and said, "Good night, Peter." And then Peter said, "Good night, Paul." There's a baby, just a couple of days old, spoke. And they were stunned, as you obviously would be. And so they asked it again. The parents said, "Go and say good night to your baby brother, or Peter, or whatever." And then Peter said a second time. This time they were both listening carefully. They said, "Good night, Paul," said Peter. And they heard it and they were just so concerned. That's why they went to come. And they thought, "Buddhist monks, you believe in rebirth. Please tell us what's happening." They just, it could speak.
Mm. Okay, second request for the mudita meditation. Rejoicing in the happiness of those who reach jhanas would be so meritorious and supportive of concord in the Sangha.
Wonderful if it would be. But sometimes some people have some very strong views and they think that
jhana's not needed.
Exactly, yes. Okay.
All right. We can still do it though, maybe. Who knows what might happen tomorrow? So anyway, it's time to say goodnight and have a lovely rest or carry on meditating. And there's still time to meditate before you meet us tomorrow in the morning if you can. Maybe some of you are starting to sleep less and wake early, so that would be wonderful. And I think tomorrow I'm also going to mention that the last day on Thursday, the timing is the same, like we'll end at 5 as planned, but I might just mix it up a bit the last 2 sessions so that we have a little bit more time together. So maybe the last Dhamma talk will be slightly shorter, and we might even have something like an auction for fun. So let's see. So the last day will be a lot of fun, but you're nowhere near the last day. So don't even think about it. There's still so much time to get enlightened.